They stood in the center of my penthouse, mocking me as if I were just hired help paid by the hour. As they live-streamed their cruelty to 200,000 followers, they had no idea that every slab of marble beneath their feet belonged to me. I held the deed in my hand, waiting for the perfect moment to crush their delusions. By the time they left, they would learn that arrogance is the most expensive debt of all. My name is Harper Lane. I am 34 years old, and as I stood before the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of the Aurora Crown Residences, the entire city of Miami lay spread out beneath me like a circuit board of gold and neon. From this height, the cars were nothing more than streams of light, and the ocean was a vast, breathing void of darkness. The air inside the penthouse was perfectly conditioned, smelling faintly of white tea and fig, a stark contrast to the humid, suffocating heat of the Florida night outside. I turned away from the view, my bare feet making no sound on the pale, imported marble floors. This space was my sanctuary. It was not designed to scream wealth, but to whisper it. The ceilings soared 20 feet high, and the walls were adorned with minimalist art that cost more than the average American home. There were no gaudy gold trims or velvet ropes here. Everything was clean lines, hidden smart home technology, and an overwhelming sense of peace. It was the kind of silence you had to earn. Harper. A deep voice broke my reverie. I looked up to see Rafael Vega walking in from the terrace. Rafa was my husband, my business partner, and the only person in this city who knew exactly how many times I had to rebuild myself from ash. He did not look like the typical Miami developer in a flashy suit. He wore a simple linen shirt and dark trousers, his presence grounding and solid. Priya just radioed up, Rafa said, his expression unreadable. "We have an unusual situation at the front desk. A couple just pulled up. They are demanding to see the royal penthouse immediately." I frowned, crossing my arms over my silk robe. "This unit is not on the market, Rafa. It is our home. Tell Priya to send them to the model unit on the 40th floor." "I told her that," Rafa replied, walking over to pour himself a glass of water. "But they are insisting. They claim they are cash buyers, ready to lease for 12 months up front if it meets their standards." They kept using the phrase, "unlimited luxury experience." "Money does not buy access to my living room," I said, reaching for my tablet to dismiss the request. "Wait," Rafa said, placing a hand gently on my wrist. "Think about it as a stress test. We just installed the new security protocols and client service scripts. If these people are as difficult as Priya says, they are the perfect practice dummies for the staff. We do not have to show ourselves. We can clear the main area and watch how the team handles high-pressure arrogance." I sighed, ready to argue. But then my tablet pinged with a forwarded file from Priya Patel, our building manager. It was a preliminary background check on the guests waiting in the lobby. Prospective tenant Mason Reed, spouse Sloane Carter. The air in my lungs seemed to vanish. I stared at the names, the digital letters burning into my retinas. Mason Reed. The man who had looked me in the eye 7 years ago and told me I was a liability. And Sloane Carter, the woman who had stood behind him, smirking, as they threw my clothes into garbage bags. Harper Rafa asked, his voice dropping an octave. "What is it?" I did not scream. I did not throw the tablet. Instead, a cold, metallic calm settled over me, freezing the blood in my veins. It was a terrifyingly lucid feeling. "It is them," I whispered, my voice steady but hollow. "It is Mason and Sloane." Rafa stiffened, his eyes narrowing instantly. "I will have security remove them. Now." "No," I said, the word cutting through the room like a blade. "No. Do not send them away." I looked up at Rafa, and I knew my eyes were devoid of the warmth he usually saw. If we kick them out, they leave with their egos intact. They leave thinking they were just too good for this place. "So, what do you want to do?" Rafa asked. I want to see them, I said. I want to see if they have changed, or if they are still the same hollow shells they were back in New Jersey. Let's go down to the security control room. I want to watch every second of this. I looked down at my left hand. A flawless, emerald-cut diamond sat on my finger. I twisted it slowly, feeling the sharp edges of the stone against my skin. It was a grounding ritual, a reminder of the weight I now carried. The day I cried over him is gone, I said, my voice hardening. Today isn't for tears. Today is for auditing the ledger. I walked past the sprawling white sofas and the panoramic view, heading straight for the private elevator that only opened with my biometric scan. As the heavy steel doors slid shut, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. The woman staring back was not the girl who had been called a parasite. She was the owner of the skyline. The doors sealed with a soft hiss, and we began our descent. The smooth descent of the elevator felt like a time machine dragging me back into the mud I had clawed my way out of. The scent of white tea vanished, replaced by the phantom smell of stale cigarette smoke and cheap air freshener. 7 years ago, New Jersey. I was 27 years old then, a ghost of a woman living on 4 hours of sleep and instant coffee. I was working double shifts as an administrative assistant, funneling every single dollar I made into the black hole that was Mason Reed's startup idea. We were living in his mother's house, a cramped suburban split level that Linda had decorated with enough fake gold and animal print to induce a migraine. I remembered the texture of the carpet against my knees. It was a Tuesday. I was on the floor, frantically gathering a scatter of red-stamped envelopes that Mason had swept off the table in a fit of frustration. "Look at her," Linda sneered, looming over me with a glass of boxed wine in her hand. Her voice was a shrill drill against my temples. "On her knees. That is where she belongs. Mason. I told you. She drags down the family aesthetic. You are a CEO in the making, and she is just clerical staff." I kept my head down, my hands trembling as I stacked the final notice for the electric bill on top of the final notice for the credit card. "I am paying these tomorrow." "Linda," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I just need my paycheck to clear." "Peanuts," Linda spat. "You bring in peanuts and act like you are feeding elephants." Then the doorbell rang, and the air in the room shifted. Sloane Carter walked in. Even back then, she carried herself with the unearned confidence of someone who had never heard the word no. She was dressed in a pristine white pantsuit that cost more than my car, clinging to Mason's arm the moment she crossed the threshold. "Mason, baby," Sloane cooed, ignoring my existence entirely. Daddy looked at the pitch deck. "He is interested. But he is worried about your focus. He thinks you have too much. Dead weight at home." Linda clapped her hands together, her fake bracelets jangling. "See Sloane is class? Sloane is the future. She is a potential stock option. Mason, Harper is just a depreciated asset." I stood up, clutching the stack of bills to my chest. I looked at my husband. I looked for the man I had married, the man I had supported for 3 years while he played entrepreneur. "Mason," I asked, "are you going to let them talk to me like this?" Mason refused to meet my eyes. He stared at the wall, his jaw tight. Sloane leaned in close to his ear, her voice a poisonous whisper that carried across the silent room. "You just have to be decisive. Mason. My dad will wire the seed money the second the papers are signed. Do you want to be a millionaire? Or do you want to be a husband to her?" The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then Mason turned to me. His face was cold, stripped of any affection I thought I had earned. "She is right. Harper," he said, his voice flat. "We are on different paths. I need a partner who elevates me. You bring nothing but bills." The pen was shoved into my hand. I signed the divorce papers in a daze, my signature shaky and unrecognizable. 10 minutes later, I was on the sidewalk. It was raining, a freezing November downpour that soaked through my thin coat instantly. I had one suitcase with a broken zipper and my car keys. I reached for my laptop bag, the one thing I owned that held my resume and my contacts, but Mason snatched it from my grip. "Don't take the laptop," he sneered, standing dry under the porch overhang while I shivered. "I paid for it with the business account. Besides, it is not like you can code anything anyway." The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. I stood there in the dark, the rain mixing with the hot tears on my face. I bit my lip so hard I tasted the metallic tang of copper, blood. It was the only warm thing left in my world. I stared at the closed door, at the warm yellow light spilling from the windows where they were likely toasting to their upgraded future. "One day," I whispered to the thunder, my voice cracking. "One day, you will beg to stand in my shadow." I slept in my car that night, parked in the back lot of a 24-hour supermarket. The harsh, buzzing neon light of the store sign flickered across my face every 3 seconds, keeping me awake, reminding me of how far I had fallen. It was a stark, brutal contrast to the soft, golden ambient lighting of the penthouse I now owned. But in that cold, cramped back seat, a fire had been lit that would burn the rest of their lives to the ground. The elevator chimed, snapping me back to the present. The doors slid open. I stepped out into the lobby, the memory fading, but the rage sharper than ever. Miami was not a paradise when I arrived. It was a grid of opportunities hidden behind neon lights and humidity. I took a job as a night shift receptionist at a crumbling motel on the outskirts of the city, earning $11 an hour while I rebuilt my life from the ground up, while the guests slept off their hangovers. I sat behind the bulletproof glass of the reception desk, taking online courses on real estate investment and learning basic coding. I did not have the money for expensive software, so I wrote my own script to scrape public records for distressed properties. I got my broker license in 6 months. By day, I showed water-stained condos to retirees with tight budgets. By night, I dissected the motel owner's contracts, highlighting the illegal clauses he used to skim overtime pay from the cleaning staff. I was learning the dark arts of the industry, the fine print where the real money was stolen. That was where I met Raphael. He was a systems engineer hired to upgrade the motel's electronic locks. He walked in right as I was handing the owner a printed copy of the state labor laws, forcing him to pay out 3 weeks of back wages he had tried to withhold. Rafa leaned against the counter, a tool belt slung over his shoulder, and looked at me with genuine curiosity. "You just quoted Commercial Statute Section 4 to a man who thinks a contract is a suggestion," he said. "You are wasting your time behind this glass." We formed a small LLC 2 weeks later. Our model was simple. We bought foreclosures that no one else wanted, fixed them ourselves, and rented them out. Rafa handled the inspections and the legal framework. I handled the negotiations and the marketing. We did not buy fancy cars. We did not go to clubs. We reinvested every single cent into the next property. But the road was not a straight line. 8 months in, a handshake deal with a veteran investor went south, and we lost $40,000 of our seed capital. I did not cry. Instead, I took a black marker and wrote on the living room wall of our duplex, "If it is not signed." It does not exist. That wall became the blueprint for my office today. Then the market turned. The demand for luxury waterfront property spiked, and I saw an opening that terrified us both. There was a derelict parking lot in downtown, an eyesore that everyone ignored. We leveraged every asset we owned, took out loans that made my stomach churn, and bought the dirt. That dirt became the Aurora Crown residences. I remembered standing on the construction site 2 years ago, wearing a yellow hard hat and steel-toed boots caked in gray mud, the general contractor. A man who had been building towers since before I was born tried to tell me that the cost of rebar had gone up 10% overnight. I looked him dead in the eye, pulling up the commodities exchange data on my phone. The spot price of steel dropped 2% this morning. "Frank," I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the jackhammers, Do not pad the invoice because you think I am just a girl playing with Dad's money. I know the price of every bolt in this building. Test me again, and you are off the site. He never questioned me again. When the tower was finished, the local business journal put my face on the cover with the headline, "From Motel Clerk to Skyline Queen." The reporter asked me what drove me to build a fortress of glass and steel in the middle of a recession. I looked at the camera, my expression flat. I just wanted a place where no one could ever kick me out again. Now, I held the official certificate of occupancy for the royal penthouse in my hands. It was the crown jewel of the portfolio, a unit listed as not for lease in the system. It was my home. But today, for the first time, it would serve a different purpose. It was no longer just a sanctuary. It was a stage, and the actors were already in the elevator. The security control room was a fortress of cool blue light and humming servers. Rafa and I stood before the bank of monitors, watching the lobby feed in high definition. A white rental SUV pulled up to the curb, its glossy paint trying too hard to look like ownership. The passenger door opened, and Sloane stepped out. She wore a tight beige dress that screamed new money and oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. She already had her phone up, the ring light reflecting in her lenses. "Hey guys," Sloane's voice filtered through the audio feed, tinny but unmistakable. "So, we are literally about to tour our new place. It is this insane 2-story penthouse. We are just going to pay the full 12 months up front because, honestly, who has time for drama with poor landlords? Swipe up for the vibe." I watched her preen for 200,000 strangers. Beside me, Rafa crossed his arms. "She has not changed," he muttered. Then Mason got out. He adjusted his blazer, smoothing the lapels with a nervous twitch. On screen. He looked successful if you didn't notice the way his hand kept drifting to his back pocket, tapping his wallet as if checking to make sure it hadn't evaporated. His eyes darted around the entrance, scanning for threats, scanning for judgment. He looked like a man walking a tightrope over a canyon of debt. Linda followed, breathless and flushed. "Oh, look at this stonework," she was saying to no one in particular, her voice shrill. "Wait until the neighbors hear about this. They are going to die, just absolutely die of jealousy." I raised an eyebrow. "They are certainly consistent." We watched them sweep into the lobby. Sloane slammed her oversized handbag onto the pristine white marble of the reception desk. The sound echoed sharply. "We need to see the top unit," Sloane announced, not even looking at the receptionist, the one not for normal people. "And please ensure we don't share the elevator with lower floor tenants. Their energy is just very low vibration." The receptionist, a young woman named Clara whom I had personally trained, didn't flinch. "Welcome to Aurora Crown. For the royal penthouse, I will need to scan your IDs and run a preliminary financial verification. It is standard protocol." "Excuse me." Linda stepped forward, her face twisting in offense. "My son owns a tech company. We do not need to prove anything to a front desk girl." Mason stood silently behind them, studying the floor. He knew his accounts were smoke and mirrors. "Is the owner around?" Sloane asked. Flipping her hair. "I would love to say hi. We probably run in the same circles. I am sure they would want to meet actual peers." Clara smiled, a professional mask of steel. "The owner is extremely private, ma'am. However, they happen to be on site today inspecting the grounds." I turned to Rafa. "It is time." I slipped an earpiece into my ear and smoothed my simple black blouse. I didn't look like a billionaire developer. I looked like a consultant, or perhaps a high-end plant technician. I walked out into the lobby, stopping by a large potted fiddle leaf fig near the elevators. I pretended to inspect a leaf for dust. Sloane spotted me instantly. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses, scanning me from head to toe. She didn't see the Swiss watch on my wrist or the quality of the fabric I wore. She only saw the Harper she remembered the broke girl on her knees. Wow! Sloane let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Is that? Harper. Still in the service industry. Huh. Who are you working for now? A plant rental company. Linda turned, her jaw dropping before snapping into a sneer. She marched over, waving a hand at me as if shooing a fly. Well, if it isn't the charity case, I suppose it is a miracle you even got clearance to stand in this lobby. Mason, look. It is your ex-wife, watering the plants. Mason looked up. His face went pale, his eyes locking onto the mine with a mixture of shock and shame. He didn't speak. Please step aside, Linda commanded, puffing up her chest. We are VIP clients. We are going up to the penthouse. Try not to block the view. I felt Rafa tense up near the security door, ready to intervene. I tapped my earpiece once the signal to hold. I looked at Linda, then at Sloane, then finally at Mason. I didn't scream. I didn't brag. I just offered a small, polite smile, the kind you give to a child throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. Certainly, I said softly. Right this way. The elevators are just ahead. I stepped back, bowing my head slightly like a dutiful employee. As they strutted past me, noses in the air, Sloane whispered loudly to her phone. Ugh, awkward run-ins with the help. So tragic. I watched the elevator doors close on them. Let them dig the hole. I whispered into the comms line to Rafa. The floors in the penthouse are very hard. Falling from that height is going to hurt. Noah Briggs, my head of leasing, led them into the private elevator with the smooth, predatory grace of a shark in a tailored suit. On the monitors in the security room, I watched Sloane narrate the ascent to her followers, her phone held high like a torch. We have private helipad access. Guys, she chirped, spinning in a circle. And a rooftop infinity pool. I mean, if you aren't living like this, what are you even doing? When the elevator doors slid open on the 50th floor, the reaction was exactly what I had paid for. The penthouse was a cathedral of light. The double-height ceilings soared above them, and the glass walls erased the boundary between the living room and the Atlantic Ocean. Linda actually gasped, clutching her chest. She walked over to the custom Italian sofa and stroked the fabric as if it were made of solid gold. Oh, Mason, Linda breathed, her eyes wide and glassy. The neighbors back on Elm Street. They will absolutely die. They will just curl up and die. Mason, however, did not look like a conqueror. He looked like a man on the way to the gallows. I zoomed the camera in on his wrist. His Apple Watch lit up with a notification in angry red text. I could not read the exact words, but I knew that color. It was a final delinquency notice. He quickly swiped it away, glancing around to see if anyone had noticed the cracks in his facade. Sloane didn't notice. She yanked Mason into the frame of her camera, forcing a smile onto his face. It is story time, she announced. Tell them, babe. Tell them how you built your tech empire from a garage. No handouts, no daddy's money, just pure hustle. Mason smiled. But it was a grimace. His startup had quietly dissolved 2 years ago, suffocated by mismanagement and his inability to code anything more complex than a calculator. He was currently surviving on a rotation of 6 credit cards. Yeah, Mason said, his voice cracking slightly. Just hustle. Noah clapped his hands together, breaking the moment. Let us discuss the financials. As this is the Royal Sky Penthouse, the terms are strict. We require a security deposit equal to 3 months of rent, plus the first month paid immediately upon signing. We also run a full forensic audit of income sources. Sloane waved her hand dismissively, not even looking away from her reflection in the window. Boring. We will just pay for the whole year right now. 12 months up front, just to keep things simple. Mason choked on air. He turned to Noah, sweat beading on his upper lip. Actually, Mason said, leaning in with a conspiratorial whisper that my microphones picked up clearly. Since we are talking about such a large sum, surely there is a professional courtesy, A discount for cash buyers. You know how it is. Businessman to businessman. Noah smiled, but his eyes were cold. I am afraid the Aurora Crown does not haggle. Mr. Reed, this is not a flea market. The price is the price. Sloane rolled her eyes and dragged the group toward the master suite. While she posed on the edge of the carved stone bathtub, claiming the lighting was worth $1 million, and Linda fantasized aloud about hosting wine tastings for people she hated, Mason slipped away. He stepped out onto the terrace, closing the glass door behind him. He thought he was alone. He did not know I had high-gain microphones embedded in the railing. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number with trembling fingers. "Jerry, please," Mason whispered, his voice desperate. "I just need a bridge loan. 20,000. I can get it back to you in a week. No, listen to me. Jerry, don't hang up." He lowered the phone slowly, his shoulders slumping. The rejection was absolute. The glass door slid open, and Noah stepped out, holding a wireless point-of-sale terminal and a leather folder. "Mr. Reed," Noah said, his voice cheerful and loud enough to startle Mason, "I have good news and bad news. The good news is that the unit is technically available right now. The bad news is that the prospective tenant in the unit next door has just expressed interest in expanding his lease to include this floor. He is a VVIP cash buyer." Noah held up the credit card machine, the screen glowing expectantly. "It is a race." "I am afraid," Noah said. "Whoever completes the transaction first gets the keys." Sloane shoved Mason toward the heavy mahogany table where Noah stood waiting with the card reader. Her fingernails dug into the fabric of Mason's blazer, a subtle act of violence hidden from her phone's camera lens. "Do not embarrass me," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. "Then," she whipped her head toward Noah, her smile brightening instantly as she addressed the room at large. "We are just going to pay for the full 12 months right now. Honestly, it is better than having to share an elevator with people who, actually have to work for a living." Mason swallowed hard. His hand went into his pocket and retrieved a heavy black metal card. It made a solid thud as he placed it on the table. It was the kind of card designed to impress bartenders and dates. But I knew the credit limit attached to it was likely lower than the cost of the rug they were standing on. "Insert the chip. Please," Noah said, his voice devoid of emotion. Mason's hand trembled. He jammed the card into the slot. Beep! The machine processed 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The silence in the room was so thick it felt like the air had been sucked out of the penthouse. Beep! A harsh, dissonant tone cut through the luxury. Noah turned the screen around. The text was red and unforgiving. "Transaction declined. Insufficient funds." "That is impossible," Sloane snapped, snatching the card from the machine before Noah could retract it. "It is a black card. The chip is probably just too thick for your cheap little reader. Try it again. The reader is functioning perfectly." "Ma'am," Noah said calmly. "Try it again," Sloane shrieked. She turned to Mason, her eyes wide with panic. "Give him the other one." "The business debit, just to hold the deposit until the bank sorts out this glitch." Mason looked like he was about to vomit. He pulled out a blue plastic card. He knew, and I knew, that card was linked to an account with less than $500 in it. But he handed it over anyway, buying himself 30 seconds of life. He tapped it. Beep! Declined. Card restricted. "This is ridiculous," Linda exploded. She swung her oversized handbag around, nearly knocking over a vase. "Your machine is broken. Do you have any idea who we are? My son runs a technology empire. We have laws protecting VIPs from this kind of harassment. I want to speak to your director immediately in the security room." Rafa slammed his hand on the desk. "That is enough." "She is screaming at Noah. I am sending security up to drag them out." "No," I said, placing a hand on his arm. I watched the screen, studying the way Mason was shrinking into himself, the way Sloane was looking at him like he was a cockroach. Not yet. We need them to say a few more things. Every insult they throw at my staff is another piece of evidence. Let the tape roll. Up in the penthouse, Noah checked his watch. He did not apologize. He did not flinch. I am afraid the machine is not the issue. Noah said, "Here is the situation. I have a VVIP client, the owner of the building, actually who is currently inspecting the property and has expressed interest in retaining this unit for personal use. If you cannot provide a valid payment or proof of a wire transfer in the next 10 minutes, I am legally obligated to release the unit to them." Sloane's face went pale. She reached out and tapped her phone screen, ending the live stream abruptly. The performance was over. She turned on Mason, her voice low and venomous. "You told me you had a runway of 18 months. You told me the investors wired the Series B funding last week. Was that all a lie? Are you telling me we are standing in a $10 million apartment and you cannot even buy us 10 minutes? It is a bank error. Sloane, I swear." Mason stammered, backing away toward the window. Noah lifted his radio to his lips. "Mr. Thorne." "Yes. We have a payment issue in the Royal Penthouse. Please come up to facilitate the exit or the transfer." I stood up from the chair in the security room. I smoothed the front of my trousers. "That is my cue." I said to Rafa, "I am going up. I want to see this face to face." "You are going up as the owner?" Rafa asked. "I am going up as the VVIP client waiting to sign." I replied, a cold smile touching my lips. Let them think they just lost the bidding war to a stranger before they realize they lost the war to me 7 years ago. We took the private express elevator. The ride was silent. When the doors opened on the 50th floor, the bell chimed with a clear, melodic ring that echoed through the tense hallway. Inside the living room, hearing the elevator, Sloane and Linda immediately straightened their posture. They frantically smoothed their hair and adjusted their clothes, assuming a wealthy peer, a potential savior, or at least someone to impress was arriving. They put their masks back on, forcing bright, fake smiles. The doors slid open. I stepped out, followed closely by Mr. Thorne, the building's general manager. Thorne stepped forward, his voice booming with authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thorne announced, gesturing toward me with a deferential bow, "may I present the chairman of Lane Vega Holdings and the owner of this tower, Ms. Harper Lane." Mr. Thorne walked in flanked by 2 broad-shouldered security officers. He stopped in the center of the room and bowed his head slightly toward me and Rafa. "Welcome, Chairman Lane, CEO Vega," Thorne said, his voice crisp and deferential. "The penthouse is ready for your final inspection." The room went silent for a heartbeat. Then, a sharp, incredulous laugh cut through the air. Sloane covered her mouth, her eyes dancing with mockery. "Oh my God, stop," she scoffed, shaking her head. "This is sad, even for you. Harper, what is this? Some kind of role play? Are you the staging girl? Did you pay these actors to call you chairman? Just drop the act. We know you are probably paid by the hour to fluff pillows." Thorne did not smile. He did not blink. He turned to Sloane, his expression carved from granite. "Ms. Carter," he said, his tone dropping to a dangerous chill. "I do not joke about ownership." He extended a leather-bound portfolio toward the group. "The Aurora Crown Residences are the sole property of Lane Vega Holdings. The registered chairman is Harper Lane. This is the deed to the building and the certificate of occupancy for this penthouse." Mason reached out and took the folder. His hands were shaking so violently that the papers rattled. He opened it, and I saw the blood drain from his face. His eyes locked onto the logo at the top of the deed, the insignia of the Sovereign Capital Group, the massive investment fund that had rejected his pitch 3 times. "They backed," Hugh Mason whispered, his voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. "The money, the capital I needed. They gave it to you. Sloane snatched the folder from him. It is fake, she shrieked, throwing the papers onto the coffee table. It has to be a forgery. I am calling my lawyer. You are going to jail for fraud. I didn't raise my voice. I simply raised a finger and pointed to the far wall. There, framed in simple black wood, was a large photograph taken 2 years ago. It showed me standing with the mayor of Miami and the CEO of Sovereign Capital, cutting the red ribbon at the tower's grand opening. There was no filter, no Photoshop, just me holding the giant scissors, looking like the owner I was. Sloane followed my finger. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I began to walk slowly around the room. I stopped by the white Italian sofa where Linda had been sitting. I noticed a smudge of foundation on the cushion and a few crumbs from a snack she must have pulled from her bag. I looked down at the pristine marble floor, now scuffed with the dirty tread of their street shoes. "Thorn," I said softly, not looking up. "Make a note. The sofa has been contaminated. Replace it, and have the floors deep cleaned. I do not want to keep anything that retains their scent." Linda's face turned a violent shade of red. She stomped forward, her chest heaving. "How dare you? I am your mother-in-law, or I was. You should show some respect for your elders." "You were always a disrespectful little stop," I said. The word was not loud, but it hit her like a slap. I turned to face her. "You lost the title of mother-in-law the night you watched your son throw me out into the rain. In this building, there are only 2 categories of people: the owner and guests who can pay. You are neither. Former relatives are not on the guest list." I pulled out my tablet and tapped the screen. The massive wall-sized TV came to life. It displayed the security footage from the lobby, recorded just 10 minutes ago. On the screen, Sloane's voice boomed, crisp and clear. "Don't let the lower floor people use the elevator. Their energy is low. Then, Linda, I don't need to prove finances. We are VIPs. We keep all security feeds for 30 days. I said, looking at Sloane. "That is plenty of time to forward this clip to every beauty brand and fashion label currently sponsoring you. I wonder how your accessible luxury image will hold up when they hear you calling working-class people low energy." Sloane looked like she was about to faint. She grabbed Mason's arm for support, but he was too busy staring at the floor. "Now," I said, closing the tablet cover with a sharp snap, "I am offering you a civilized choice." I stepped closer, my heels clicking on the stone. Option A. You pay the cleaning fee for the sofa and the floors, plus a penalty for abusing my staff. Then, you leave immediately via the service elevator in the back. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Option B. I call the police for trespassing and attempted fraud with that declined credit card. I will invite the press into the lobby to film your exit in handcuffs. And I will attach this CCTV footage along with the financial audit proving Mason's company is bankrupt to the police report, which becomes public record. I tilted my head, studying their terrified faces. "So, what will it be?" The silence in the penthouse was shattered by the sound of Sloane's carefully constructed reality fracturing. The threat of losing her sponsorships hit her harder than any physical blow could have. She spun toward Mason, her hands clawing at the lapels of his jacket, her eyes wide with a frantic, animalistic terror. "Mason, fix this," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Do you hear her? She is going to ruin me. Call the bank, call your investors, get the money." Right now, Mason stood frozen, his face a mask of gray ash. He looked at Sloane, then at his mother, and finally at the floor. The shame was radiating off him in waves, thick and suffocating. "Sloane," Mason whispered, his voice trembling. I can't. What do you mean you can't?" Sloane shrieked. "Just transfer the funds." "There are no funds," Mason yelled back, the confession tearing out of his throat. "The business account was frozen yesterday. The credit cards are maxed out. I have $40 in my checking account," That is it. That is all there is. The revelation hung in the air like toxic smoke. Linda gasped, taking a stumbling step back from her son as if his poverty were contagious. You useless boy, Linda hissed. She looked around the opulent room, then turned her glare on Mason. You told me you were a CEO. You told me we were set for life. I pushed her away. She pointed a shaking finger at me. I pushed a woman who owns a skyscraper out the door. For a bankrupt liar, I stood perfectly still, my hands clasped behind my back. I did not need to speak. I let their own words bounce off the glass walls, filling the space they could not afford to occupy for even 15 minutes. It was a symphony of self-destruction. Enough, I said finally, my voice cutting through their bickering. They all froze, looking at me. I am feeling generous today. I continued, my tone devoid of warmth. I will not file criminal charges for the attempted fraud. I will not release the security footage to the press, and I will waive the cleaning fees for the damage you caused to my property. Sloane let out a sob of relief, but I held up a hand. On one condition. I said, you will leave this building right now, but you will not use the private elevator. You will not walk through my lobby. You will leave via the service elevator in the kitchen, exit through the rear loading dock, and walk past the dumpster collection area. Sloane's jaw dropped. She looked at me with pure venom. Are you joking? I am wearing Valentino. My body was born for red carpets, not for trash chutes. I am not walking out through the garbage. I shrugged, turning to Thorne. Very well. Mr. Thorne, call the police. And tell the paparazzi stationed at the hotel next door that Sloane Carter is being escorted out in handcuffs. I am sure the live stream of her arrest will get excellent engagement. Wait, Mason shouted. He looked at me. For the first time in 7 years, he really looked at me. He didn't see the girl he had bullied. He saw the cold, impenetrable distance between us. He realized then that I didn't hate him. I didn't care enough to hate him. He was just a stain on my floor that needed removing. We will take the service elevator, Mason said, his voice defeated. Mason. No, Sloane protested, stomping her foot. Sloane, shut up, Mason muttered, closing his eyes. We don't have $500 to pay the fine. We don't have money for a lawyer. Do you want to go to jail because I can't bail you out? The truth stripped Sloane of her last defense. She slumped, her vanity collapsing under the weight of their bankruptcy. Noah gestured toward the kitchen door, his face impassive. This way. Follow me. As they began to shuffle toward the exit, I took a few steps forward, intercepting Mason. He flinched, expecting a slap or a final insult. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, plain white business card. With a sleight of hand I had practiced, I slipped it into the breast pocket of his cheap blazer. I leaned in close, so close I could smell the fear sweat on him. If one day you get tired of pretending to be rich, I whispered, my voice barely a breath. The maintenance department is always looking for people to scrub the floors. The back entrance opens at 6 o'clock. Mason stared at me, his eyes wide and watery. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He just touched the pocket where the card lay, his fingers brushing the cardstock. Noah led them through the pristine chef's kitchen and opened the heavy steel service door. A blast of hot, humid air carrying the distinct, sour smell of rotting vegetables and bleach rushed into the cool penthouse. Sloane gagged, covering her nose with her hand. Linda began to mutter a prayer, looking up at the ceiling as if God might airlift her out. Mason walked last, his head bowed low, stepping over the threshold from the heaven he had pretended to own into the hell he had actually built. Clang! The heavy fire door slammed shut behind them. The sound echoed through the silent penthouse, final and absolute. It was the sound of a chapter closing, but for Mason, I knew the story on that card was just beginning. That night, The illusion of Mason's life did not just crack, it shattered into dust. He returned to his cramped rental apartment to find the closet doors wide open and empty. Sloane was gone. She had left nothing but a crumpled note on the kitchen counter, written in hasty, jagged strokes. "My lawyer will be in touch. Do not drag me down with you." In the living room. Linda sat on the second-hand sofa, sobbing into her hands, lamenting that she had only $12 left in her purse and needed a refill on her blood pressure medication. Mason did not comfort her. He couldn't. He walked out onto the small balcony that overlooked a dumpster and pulled the white card from his pocket. Under the orange glow of the street lamp, he read the printed title, Harper Lane, President, Lane Vega Holdings, and below that, in my sharp, angular handwriting, a message that offered no pity, only a lifeline. Pride does not pay rent. Work does. Back entrance. 6 o'clock in the morning. Monday. He stood there for a long time, listening to the sirens wailing in the distance, realizing that for the first time in his life, no one was coming to save him. On Monday morning, the sun had not yet risen when Mason appeared at the loading dock of the Aurora Crown. He was not wearing the fake Swiss watch. He was not wearing the tailored blazer. He stood in a button-down shirt that he had bought from a discount rack, his hands empty. 2 of the loading dock workers recognized him from the Penthouse debacle. They elbowed each other, snickering loud enough for him to hear. "Hey, look," one of them laughed. "Isn't that the VIP from Saturday? The guy who tried to buy the sky, guess the view is different from down here." "Huh," the other mocked. Mason's jaw tightened, and I saw his fists clench at his sides via the security feed. But he did not turn around. He did not leave. He stood his ground until the heavy steel doors rolled up. "Mr. Vance, my head of operations, called me on the internal line immediately. Ms. Lane," Vance said, his voice hesitant. "He is here. The guy from the weekend. He is asking for an application. What do you want me to do?" "Treat him like every other applicant." "Vance," I replied, sipping my coffee as I watched the monitor. "No special treatment, no harassment, and do not mention my name. If he can do the work, hire him. If he cannot, fire him." I watched Mason sit at a metal table in the break room, hunching over the clipboard. In the box marked desired position, he wrote 2 words, janitor and maintenance. Beneath that, anything available, his hand shook as he wrote it, a tremor of humiliation that he had to physically force down. Vance looked at the gaping holes in Mason's employment history, years spent playing CEO of a phantom company, but he asked no questions. He simply handed Mason a uniform. The weeks that followed were a blur of gray reality. I watched the transformation through the lens of the security cameras. It was a montage of penance. I saw Mason dragging heavy black trash bags across the asphalt of the parking garage, his face slick with sweat and grime. I saw him on his knees in the lobby, the same lobby where he had once stood arrogantly scrubbing a coffee stain from the marble with a harsh chemical cleaner. I saw him changing fluorescent bulbs in the service corridors, his arms trembling from holding the ladder steady for hours. His hands, once soft and manicured, became red and blistered. Then, the blisters broke, bled, and eventually turned into hard, yellow calluses. His back bowed under the weight of the work, but every Friday, when the direct deposit hit his account, he stared at the pay stub with a look of profound confusion. It was not a fortune. It was barely enough to survive, but it was real. It was consistent. It was the first honest money he had earned in a decade. One night, Rafa found me in the study, watching a feed of Mason polishing the glass front doors at 2 o'clock in the morning. He was alone, moving with a rhythmic, exhausted efficiency. "Does it make you feel better?" Rafa asked softly, leaning against the door frame. Seeing him like this, I watched Mason pause to wipe his forehead with his sleeve. There was no pretense left in him, no camera crew, no audience. It is not about feeling better. I said quietly. It is just surprising. For the first time in his life, he actually looks like a grown man. While Mason learned the value of a dollar the hard way, Sloane's world disintegrated in public. A few days after the Penthouse incident, an anonymous audio file was leaked to a gossip blog. It captured her voice crystal clear, calling her followers gullible sheep and mocking the working class as low-vibration peasants. Within 48 hours, every brand deal she had evaporated. She was dropped by her agency, and the internet, which she had courted so desperately, turned on her with vicious delight. She claimed she was hacked. She claimed it was AI. But nobody believed her. The quiet rhythm of the building continued until a Tuesday evening. Mason was emptying the shredder bins in the main conference room. He was invisible to the executives sitting around the table. Just a man in a gray jumpsuit. The IPO is moving faster than expected, one of the junior analysts said, tapping on a laptop. The press is going to be digging deep, though. They want the personal angle on Harper Lane. The Motel to Millions story is great, but they are looking for dirt. Ex-husbands, old lawsuits, anything scandalous. Mason froze. He stopped tying the trash bag. He stood perfectly still in the corner of the room, the realization hitting him cold and hard. If the press dug into my past, they would find him. And this time, he wouldn't just be the man who cleaned the floors. He would be the villain in the national headline that was about to break. The headline hit the internet like a bomb, orchestrated by a desperate woman looking for a payout. Billionaire tycoon uses employment to torture ex-husband. It was accompanied by a grainy, zoomed-in photo of Mason dragging a trash bin through the rain. Linda had sold the story to a tabloid for $5,000, trying to burn my reputation to the ground just before the public offering of the Aurora Crown. My lead investor demanded an emergency meeting immediately. 2 hours later, the Penthouse was a theater of judgment. The room was crowded with the investor's legal team. A cynical reporter invited as a neutral witness, Mr. Thorne and Rafa. On the other side sat the accused Linda, dabbing dry eyes with a tissue, Sloane, looking hollow and frantic, and Mason. I had told Mason to leave his uniform downstairs. He stood in his own cheap shirt, looking like a man walking to the gallows. "Ms. Lane," the reporter began, placing a recording device on the marble table. "The allegations are serious. Did you specifically hire Mr. Reed as a janitor to inflict psychological distress and humiliate him for past grievances?" Before I could answer, Linda wailed, throwing her hands up. "She is a monster." She sat in her ivory tower and laughed while my son scrubbed her floors. She made us use the service elevator like rats. She is vindictive and cold. I did not scream. I did not argue. I simply pressed a button on my tablet. The massive wall screen behind me roared to life. "I believe in evidence, not emotion," I said calmly. First, the video from the lobby played. Sloane's voice echoed through the room, sharp and cruel, calling the staff low vibration and demanding special treatment. Then, the audio from the Penthouse tour played, capturing Linda's arrogance as she claimed they did not need to prove their finances because they were superior to the rules. Finally, I projected a document onto the screen. It was magnified so every person in the room could read it. It was Mason's employment application. "Read the handwriting," I commanded. "Under position desired, Mr. Reed wrote anything available, even floors. And here is the date. He applied freely. He accepted the wage freely." The room went silent. The reporter frowned, looking from the screen to the trembling family. He turned his gaze to Mason. "Mr. Reed," the reporter asked, his pen hovering over his notebook. "Is this true? Were you coerced? Did she force you into this position to mock you?" This was the moment. Mason could lie. He could try to save his mother's pride and destroy my IPO. He looked at Linda, who was nodding frantically at him. He looked at Sloane, who was checking her phone for notifications that would never come. Then He looked at me. He looked around the penthouse he had never been able to afford. He took a deep, shaky breath. "No," Mason said, his voice quiet but steady. "I was not forced," Linda gasped. "Mason." "Shut up, Mom," Mason said, not unkindly. He turned to the reporter. "I left Harper 7 years ago because I was greedy. I told her she brought nothing to the table but bills. I chased money and status, and I failed. When I came back here, I was bankrupt. I begged for the job. Harper never threatened me. She never mocked me. She just gave me a mop and a paycheck. It was the first honest thing I have had in years." Sloan tried to jump in, desperate to shift the narrative. "It was the pressure. You don't understand the toxicity of the influencer industry. I was a victim of expectations." The reporter looked at her with disdain. "Ms. Carter, my publication has received the audio of you calling working-class people peasants, and Mr. Thorne just handed me a list of 6 brands suing you for breach of contract due to moral clauses. I don't think you are the victim here." The air went out of the room. The attack had collapsed. My lead investor stood up, buttoning his jacket. "I think we are done here," he said, nodding at me. "Harper, you handled this with remarkable restraint. The IPO proceeds as planned. This is the kind of integrity we invest in." As the room cleared, security escorted Linda and Sloan out. They looked smaller now, stripped of their delusions. I walked over to Mason, who was standing alone by the glass wall. "They mocked me in my own penthouse," I said softly. "But what I revealed next destroyed them, not with money, but with the truth." Mason looked down at his hands. "I should go. My shift starts in an hour." "Mason," I said. He looked up. "If you want to stay, then from tomorrow, keep working like you did today. Do not do it for me. Do it for the man you actually want to be." I turned and walked out to the terrace where Rafa was waiting. We stood together, watching the sun set over Miami, turning the ocean into liquid gold. Behind us, through the glass, I saw Mason pick up his cleaning supplies. He caught his own reflection in the polished floor, and for the first time in his life, he did not look away. The revenge was complete, not because I had destroyed him, but because I had forced him to finally become real. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I would love to chat and hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.